I am Michael Erlewine, and welcome to Spirit Grooves, shows devoted to awareness of all kinds. This series of stories is about experiences I have had with learning meditation, and particularly what is called Mahamudra meditation. It's a bit of a personal story, but it's also a story of discovering the Dharma. I can tell you that nothing I've ever done requires as much patience and concentration as doing macro photography. It can take half an hour of excruciating pain to hold a physical position with a tripod and camera until the wind manages to die down, just to take a single photograph of a flower or an insect. And I am not known for my patience, but in photographing nature I had found a worthy teacher. Before long I was spending up to several of the best hours of the day, usually at dawn, immersed in and peering through various special lenses at the lives of tiny critters and plants. I soon found myself searching for finer and finer lenses so that I could see ever more clearly into these tiny, perfect micro worlds. Yet I just couldn't see clearly enough, so I just needed better and better lenses. The outside, day-to-day world I lived in might seem dingy and worn much of the time, but these micro worlds were as fresh as a new flower or a just hatched butterfly, and I was soaking it up. Without really thinking about it, I was using all of my Mahamudra experience and techniques here in these micro worlds, and I literally mean without thinking. As I concentrated on this photographing, looking deep into and through the lenses, I began having extended periods of resting my mind. But I was not even fully aware of this. I mean, it was true rest. As I look back now, I can see that I was me, Michael, resting my mind and life in the tiny scenes I was peering through lenses to see. I was finding true rest in these miniature scenes I could see, and I so much needed the rest that I was not at first aware that I was, I believe, also resting my mind in a dharmic way and in a profound sense. When I point out that I was not fully aware of what was happening, this is an important point. Please keep in mind that I'm holding a precise position, camera and tripod in hand, frozen to a stance so that a tiny insect does not fly away, and waiting for the incessant Michigan wind to die down, just long enough to take a photograph. And all the while I'm peering through this very special light-gathering lens into a micro world at a tiny critter. And clarity, the world I could see in there was awesome, beautiful, and so very, very clear. I was resting in that clarity. I was resting my mind, and I loved what it did for me. Certainly it was beyond thought. For some reason, through the looking glass, so to speak, I was able to rest my mind like I had never been able to do, sitting on the cushion, meditating, or even in my work, and I mean for a long time. It would take a book to explain what resting the mind really is all about. No, even a book could not communicate what I'm referring to here. It would take being personally shown how to rest the mind, but I can't do that here, and I'm not even a teacher. Before I knew it, I was looking forward to these forays into the dawn as if my life depended on it. I could not wait to get up every morning, to get outside in the fields and launch myself into this particular state of mind. I knew this was connected to my practice, but that knowledge was not important at the time, which tells you something by itself. It was the farthest thing from my mind. I just liked getting my mind right, out there in nature. I was fascinated by what I saw through these lenses. In the end, of course, what I was seeing was related to my own mind. As I look back today, what was really taking place is all too clear, and nature held just the reminders I needed to keep my attitude adjusted. The four common preliminaries of Buddhist practice, what are often called the four thoughts that turn the mind toward the Dharma, are ever present in the natural world. Things like the preciousness of life, impermanence, the laws of karma, and so on. All of these are literally magnified and obvious in nature. We're kill or be killed, eat or be eaten, and things like that, like the fact that a flower blooms for one night, a huge moth that lives but 24 hours, etc., continually reminded me of these precious four thoughts. I don't have to remind myself. Life and nature reminded me instant by instant and day by day. It can be heartbreaking. I had not looked at impermanence this closely for many years, but I was looking at it now. Raw nature is the best reminder of the four thoughts that turn the mind that I am aware of. For that spring, summer, and fall, I was really away from the maddening crowd, so to speak, off by myself, observing my own mind in the midst of purely natural phenomena. But what I did not see at first was how much I was changing. Perhaps stabilizing is a better word. It was my mind and my practice that were stabilizing. When I was out in the field and the flowers, I could actually rest my mind. I could see the nature of thoughts as they arose, look at their nature, watch them dissolve, and not drag around some sad thought all day long. Where before I was probably engrossed in figuring out why so-and-so did this or that, or how I managed to embarrass myself in this or that situation, now thoughts like that could be seen not for their content, what they were about, but in their actual nature, and they would just dissolve like dew on the grass. In an instant they were gone, back where they came from, away, and I was not etching yet another karmic track deep in my mind. Each morning I was up way before dawn, gathering my equipment and heading out the door. It seemed I could not get enough of whatever it was I was finding out there in nature, peering through my camera lenses. But in reality, I was learning to rest in the true nature of my mind. I was practicing Mahamudra, but in a more direct manner than ever before. I knew that I was using Mahamudra techniques, but I was not initially aware of how deeply I was changing internally. That awareness only came later, and I studied camera equipment like there was no tomorrow, in particular fine lenses. I just somehow could not get lenses that would gather enough light and open up my vision as far as I needed. Every spare dollar I could scrounge went into sharper and sharper lenses. I scavenged up. I sold older equipment for this or that more accurate lens, teleconverter, close-up diopter, or whatever would bring more light and acuity to what I was doing. And the lenses actually helped. And I studied lenses. I went to optometrists and discussed with them the sharpness of lenses and what was needed for the human eye to see at its very best. I got new glasses and special magnifiers for the eyepiece in my camera. I tracked down lenses that are almost never found, lenses that are legendary for their ability to gather light and to focus with extreme accuracy. I burned through the finest lenses that Nikon had to offer, and they have a number, and on into lenses that are even better than anything Nikon can produce. I worked with special architectural lenses that tilt and shift, allowing you to bring a whole flat field of flowers into focus, the nearest and the farthest flower all perfectly clear. I stacked lenses one on another to get even closer. I used teleconverters and diopters and extension tubes to reach beyond what I otherwise could. Then I began to stack photos, which means to take a series of photos, each at a particular focal point, from near to far, and then merge the stack to make a single image where all parts, from the front to the back, are apparently in perfect focus. I'm just giving you a taste of what was a real obsession on my part, and also a learning curve. I've taken hundreds of thousands of photos during that period and gradually became a better and better photographer. That is not such a lot of photos until you take into consideration how long it can take for one macro photo to be taken. And through all of this, it was not the resulting thousands of photographs that concerned me. I hardly even looked at them. Instead, it was the process that had me spellbound. The clear looking at the subjects and the seeing. It was the seeing and it was the resting. Ostensibly, I was looking through finer and finer lenses at nature. In reality, I was learning to look at my own mind through the process of photography, and I had managed to confuse the two. Yep, Zen and the Art of Photography is a book I could probably write now. I was learning to rest my mind in the moment and allow whatever natural beauty there was to present itself to me, to show itself and to appear. Everything was clear and luminous, and the sheer exhilaration involved is hard to describe. Everything was lucid. I was lucid. I was clear as a bell. And although I continued to practice Mahamudra during my ordinary workday, as I found this or that project to do, it was mostly in those rarefied mornings, out in the dawn, that my mind could fully rest and appear lucid. I was addicted to it right off, and could not wait each day to get out there among the bugs and flowers and get my mind right. And as mentioned earlier, this went on from late May until late November of 2008, almost every day when it didn't rain. I don't know what my family thought, other than I had become a camera nut and that I didn't have a job. I don't know what I thought about it myself. I guess I never thought about it. I was spending an inordinate amount of time doing it. My extended family and friends would drive by me where I was setting up one shot or another along the roadside and give me strange looks like, "Oops, there he is again. Doesn't he work anymore?" I didn't have a job. I was looking for one. So I had the time, and after a lifetime of working jobs, this was the first real break I had ever given myself, and I put it to good use. It was wonderful. It was transformative. All of this time, what was really happening, as I look back now, is that my Mahamudra meditation was stabilizing. After all, I was doing it not only on those early morning shoots, but all the rest of the day as well, as much as I could happen to remember or wake up into moments to do it, which was more and more often. My initial fear and guilt that I was no longer interested in sitting practice, in doing sadhanas and other practices, began to fall away. I just did not care anymore what it looked like to those around me, or even to my old self. Whatever it was that I was doing with Mahamudra was enough for me. I was full up, and I was in love with and happy with my practice for the first time in my life. It was just natural to move off the cushion for a while after so many years sitting there. I had done 2 nundros, which are the traditional extended sadhanas, not to mention other more complex practices, and I imagine I had accumulated what I was able to accumulate. I was tired for the moment of on-the-cushion practice, and I inhaled Mahamudra practice like a breath of fresh air. It was soon clear to my family that I was no longer spending much time on the cushion, and their looks and glances told me that they probably didn't approve and certainly didn't understand. After all, I didn't really understand myself what was happening. Michael, who had been more or less diligent as a practitioner for so many years, like 30 years or so, was out and out playing hooky, and there was no excusing it. And I did not care. I just knew I had found my way and was progressing somewhere after all the years of anticipation. I was my own counsel in this regard. Outside approval or disapproval, my own or others, could not change my mind. When summer ended and winter came, I had to curtail those early morning explorations and gradually move back inside. I looked forward to the following spring with unusual longing, but I also found that I was able to carry on my mental training at my desk and around the house with no problem. Something had changed within me and permanently, but I was not really able to get a handle on it until the following spring, when I was once again headed back out into the fields and the woods. And out I did go as early as January and February, a bunch in March, and constantly by April. And I had been gathering my equipment and upgrading what I could afford. But things had changed for me in a quite unexpected way. But it would take me some months to figure this out. At the time, I was hell-bent to immerse myself ever more deeply into nature, and my outings were now ranging ever farther from home. Instead of spending my early mornings at the back of the local cemetery, at the fringe where the wild vegetation meets the well-groomed lawn, as I had done the year before, I was now actively planning trips to nature spots all over. I was studying maps. I became fascinated with Michigan bogs and the life possible in those very special environments. It turns out that bogs only really thrive at latitudes higher than 45 degrees. Big Rapids, Michigan, where I live, is almost 44 degrees of latitude. So we have bogs in this area, and just an hour or so north, there are really vast bogs. Why bogs? I have no idea. I'm an enthusiast, and there's always something that fascinates me. Perhaps it was that the bogs are so very, very fragile, tiny micro-environments that hardly anyone has ever seen, much less spent time on. Out there, isolated from nutrients, since the plant life on them can't get nutrients from below because the peat is anaerobic. It won't let anything through. Many bog plants have become carnivorous, depending on insects and whatnot for food. Familiar bog plants include the pitcher plant and the sundew and the Venus flytrap, among others. Whatever the reason, I was fascinated by these bogs and found myself traveling many hours to visit them and to carefully document what I saw there. I guess my point here is that I had taken my photography yet another step, not only shooting whatever was available each morning near my home, but now traveling long distances to sample this or that special environment, this particular plant or that one. Without realizing it, my enthusiasm had caused me to overstep the boundary between Mahamudra practice and that of becoming more of a naturalist than I already was. From the time I was about 6 years old until I was in my late teens, I had studied nature with a fierce passion. So I already knew all about nature. I already knew all the little woodland critters, and I knew them well, their habitat, behavior, and life and death struggles. And here I was further upping the ante as far as being a naturalist was concerned. In my enthusiasm, I could vaguely sense something was slightly off, but for the life of me, I could not place the problem. It took time for this to gradually surface in my consciousness, but eventually it did become clear to me that I did not really want to become a full-scale naturalist once again. I was, as I do so often, confusing the baby with the bathwater again, a bad habit I have. It was like a mara, or an illusion that confused me, and this all came to a head during a trip to the top of Michigan's Lower Peninsula, and it's kind of a fun story. I had been invited to join a very select group of naturalists, ones who were given permission to enter a rare bog preserve at the very top of the Upper Peninsula of Michigan in order to take a survey of wildlife there. Bogs, as I had mentioned, are a very fragile environment, and even walking on them is destructive. But this conservation society allowed special teams to enter these close reserves once or twice a year, and I was to be the team's herpetologist. I had been trained in reptiles and amphibians since I was a child, and so I knew all about them, and I was geeked. I just could not wait to get to Michigan's Upper Peninsula and to get out on those bogs with my camera. My trip was to last a number of days, and I was up before dawn of the first day in my car and heading north. It must have been about 4:30 a.m. when I hit the road. The only hiccup was the fact that I had just had some fairly protracted oral surgery, several days of root canal work, and the tooth in question had developed a really nasty abscess underneath it. I was already on my second dose of antibiotics, this time really heavy antibiotics, the first round having not touched the problem. I was not about to be stopped, however, by some wayward tooth. So I was in some pain, and my lower jaw was swollen. I assumed that as time passed, the swelling would just go down. I was on antibiotics. Anyway, hell or high water would not have kept me off those bogs, and on I went. My first stop was a small bog at the top of the Lower Peninsula, just beneath the Mackinac Bridge. I was out on the bog in the bright morning sun by 8 a.m., already hours from my home. It was a magnificent morning, yet already I was having trouble with that dumb tooth, a certain amount of throbbing and little sharp shoots of pain in my jaw. I did my best to ignore it and told myself, well, it's just going to die down. There I was in my hip boots, way out on the surface of the bog, surrounded by moss and small bushes, and carefully stepping my way along in the ooze. I hope you have enjoyed this segment of Spirit Grooves. If you'd like to read further on awareness, please see my free ebooks on astrologyland.com. Look for the book link in the middle of the page. My name is Michael Erlewine, and I curate what is probably the largest library of astrology in the world, the Heart Center Library. I hope you have enjoyed this segment of Spirit Grooves, and I look forward to seeing you again soon.